Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transportation, which I'm calling transportation, not transport, even though the topic today is pretty European, which is the issue of cross-border rail. Now, I have talked about this before. I think I talked about this more in the sense of crayon. So when I say crayon, what I mean is that at one point I drew. Here you can see all of my memes and all of the World War III real maps. Um, I have no idea why that's a bunch of numbers. Let me see if we can find what you. It would be called Europabahn, I think. Europabahn, and I guess the numbers are just updates. So I crayoned this. This was years ago. I streamed this at one point. Um, if you're wondering about the color scheme, there's a blog post for this. If you're wondering, the color scheme is that blue ings lines that already exist or are under, like this already exists, or are under construction. Some of these lines are slow, like this is supposed to be like kind of running on a slow line, so that on the fast line you can get to Düsseldorf. And then red is stuff that I'm proposing is to be built. So, for example, this would be in Belgium. So this is not cross-border actually, but I kind of want to highlight an important issue of cross-border rail, which is yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I think the map was I think the last map update was 2020, but I'm pretty sure he streamed it. Um, More recently, like maybe 2021. But anyway, like I need to redo a bunch of things there. And this is not the time for this. Like if you wanted an example of what I need to redo, um, first of all, I've kind of given up on getting into effort. It's essentially for Germany. What it does is it um is essentially a way to get from Hamburg to München, or to get Nuremberg, from which you get to München a little faster. The issue being that this line is a high speed. This is Germany's longest high speed line. It's not actually that fast. It was built in the 80s, mixed passenger freight. We will get back to that and why this is not the best and how it is continuing to uh, wreck European rail planning. This mirage. Um, some of these numbers need to be redone a little bit. I think in a lot of places I'm being too optimistic. Um, this is too pessimistic. I think 75 is it can be done in less than that. Um, but anyway, the uh, this I think is too optimistic. 50 minutes Dortmund to Hannover. But anyway, this essentially gets you from Hamburg and which is not here. Hamburg is here and Hannover down to Nuremberg and München gets you like you can do it this way. This is the current plan. Uh, but this, I think this is like half an hour slower. It's not that important. I mean, it's, I mean, it's a connection that speeds up a little bit, but it speeds up only from a few cities to a few cities, essentially. I mean, whereas something like this connection, this is already being planned. They're planning it the German way, which means they're planning this um, with a lot of low speed gap, unfortunately. So even though it's possible to do Erfurt to Fulda in 30 minutes and Fulda to Frankfurt in 30 minutes, a lot of the plans leave a little bit too much low speed. So I think it's going to be like 35-ish each, maybe even 40, which is really bad for connections, which leads a lot of German rail advocates to then say, well, it's a waste of time because you can't get it down to 30 minutes, and 30 minutes is how you're going to connect between knots on a half hourly or an hourly takt. Well, you absolutely could do it in 30. You just need to leave fewer gaps, which is, I wouldn't say it's easier said than done, but it's not actually that hard to do. I mean, the example I keep giving about stuff like Hannover to Bielefeld. This is a line that is, if you check yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly, exactly. And there is, It's kind of weird to say cheaping out because German rail construction costs are not actually low, and this is where I actually have a spreadsheet, um, which might actually be complete within Europe. Um, this is the construction costs. Um, and unfortunately, there's actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, then you might need to copy paste, but or like enter things individually. But if you're on Twitch, just go and check this out. Um, the this is the cost per kilometer. It's not quite inflation adjusted, but most of these are in a very narrow range of years. I emphasize most. Um, essentially, because all the 80s, 90s lines are adjusted for like not 2000s, 2010s because of what I was able to find. So this is the Netherlands. It's expensive. It's expensive for reasons that have actually been discussed in the literature. It's early commitment. Essentially, they committed in the early 90s to building this at 300 kilometers an hour. Um, and because of the success of the TGV, of the TGV, maybe you should not call it TGV, right? It's either TGV or TGV, but anyway, they built this. Well, not this. In the Netherlands, they built with a border. This is a Belgian line, HSL4. The lines in Belgium being HSL1, which is the good one. It's the connection to France. 2 is, I believe 2 and 3. I don't remember. I think 2 and 3 are these, like up to Liège and beyond Liège. These are very, and I'm going to talk about the Belgian problem in a moment. Yeah. And the Netherlands, Asia, it's a small country, like geographically small country. So a model based on very high speed is not very relevant for its domestic trains, which means that it has this expensive high speed line, which is not actually relevant to its intercity rail program because between Amsterdam and Rotterdam, yeah, it's faster, but I mean, look at the distance between them. It's not actually that distant. So high top speed is not terribly important. What does matter is being able to connect from anywhere to anywhere with timed connections, which the Netherlands does do on the Swiss model. They've essentially refined the Swiss model to work in a much higher construction cost environment. The Swiss model is integration between infrastructure, rolling stock, and schedule. It's a model that's under a lot of fiscal pressure to be low cost and only build the absolute minimum required and then make that work reliably. Lots of investment in reliability. Sweden, not Sweden, Switzerland here is mostly blue. These are not fast lines. Again, Switzerland is a small country. Its domestic trains don't need to be especially fast. They essentially just did little changes. Like they built a lot of tunnels here from Olten to Bern to so this so Zurich to Basel was always an hour minus change, but they wanted to get Bern down there as well. So this is a little longer, so they need to build a lot of tunnels. This is in an environment with very low construction costs. The Netherlands is an environment with very high ones, so they're trying to essentially make this kind of integrated timetabling work without being able to build little infrastructure bypasses when needed. And the issue is they built this, and it's pretty useless. The international trains that use it don't get a lot of ridership because they're really expensive, and also because there's this slow gap between Brussels and Antwerp. And oh yeah, okay. So HSL2 is so the edge is the place where it cuts. Yeah. So the capacity. Oh, okay. So um, current capacity, if you're wondering, the capacity bottlenecks are Paris to the bifurcation to Dijon and Lyon, and from Frankfurt to Mannheim, there's a red line here, which denotes a high-speed line to be built. I think it will soon be blue, by which I mean like Deutsche Bahn is aware that this line, Leitbahn, is its most crowded. it's, I believe, in passenger throughput per day, it is very narrowly behind Paris through the bifurcation. I think this is 90,000 a day, and this is 80,000 or something like that. So very busy. You might see that there are already several routes doing that. Most important is the lead band. It's a kind of fast one. I think it's like in 50 minutes or something like that, or 40 something minutes. And this is about to be cut to 27 with the new high-speed line. They also need to do long-term renewal on this, which is shutting down this for several months, and so they had to figure out how to detour around while still fitting into the time transfers. They're going via Mainz. It's maybe a 30 or a 40-minute detour right now, but again, it's just a few months of uh, intensive shutdown for renewal. Um, and so the idea is to build this. And this is but most of the German lines there are things that are already being discussed. Um, this is called the Y trace because it's kind of a Y to Bremen, Hamburg, and Hanover. So it's called U-Trasse, Y-Trasse. Um, it's essentially been held up for decades because of NIMBYs. They might actually get this done this time. This is being planned. This is being delayed, like Bielefeld to Dortmund. This is pure fiction. Which, I mean, they need to do this, but they're not currently doing this. Again, Germany loves these little slowdowns, even while having high construction costs. Lots of extra tunneling. Remember how you mentioned that this is a combined passenger freight railway? Well, if it's combined passenger and freight railway, you can't do what was done to reduce construction costs on the TGV. Um, this is uh, an old site, I believe, by Clemtilia, actually, um, where this is a comparison. Let me kill my face for a sec. Between uh, the old line from Paris to Lyon, this is 511 kilometers, and the new line, which is, I think, 420 something. So this is, so first of all, this is a shorter line. It's just more direct, less curvy. They also skip Dijon. Note Dijon on the LGV network is not on the line. This Dijon is not here. This is Dijon. The old line goes via Dijon and then from Dijon to Lyon. But again, but also fewer curves. However, instead of curves, they do have lots of grades. So very steep grades on this, using the fact that this line was built in the middle of the 19th century around the capabilities of 1840s steam trains. These steam trains cannot climb steep grades, so they had to keep the rolling grade to less than 1%. This was built in the 1970s and 80s for 300 kilometers an hour. Um, Now, these are not EMUs, they don't have very good initial acceleration, but they start at the bottom of each of these grades at 300. So, yeah, they will probably be slowed down a little bit, but that's fine. And so so note also that there are tunnels here, a handful of them. There are none between Paris and Lyon. Uh, I'm not going to talk more about how Paris and Lyon was built very cost effectively because that is likely going to be the topic for next week. Um, Next week being Tuesday, on Saturday due to the MIT mystery hunt, which I'm solving remotely. I thankfully do not need to be in Boston for this. I am not going to be streaming. But anyway, the um, so this was not available to. This trick is not available to mixed lines because freight cannot do 3.5%. So why should you ever build a mixed line? Well, uh, sometimes you have a freight bottleneck. This is the most important in Switzerland. You might notice that for many years I found one negative thing to say about Swiss rail planning, and the negative thing is that this line, Turi to Lugano, I think it's planned to be 2 hours, whereas very lazily they could do it even in an hour and a half, and that would fit into their hourly slots. I don't know why they're doing it in 2 hours, or they're being that conservative about it, but everything else they do is amazing. This is the Gotthard Base Tunnel. It, I believe, actually has more freight than passenger traffic, measured by number of trains. And this is January, I think. Um, this is this is Timmelberg, and this is already it's like this base tunnel that is half built and is used to bypass some S-Bahn lines. Again, red is stuff that has not been built and is not being built. This is kind of for completion. But anyway, the point is that in Switzerland, this is an enormous freight bottleneck, or it used to be. But more importantly, uh, you can't avoid tunnels. This is the Alps we're talking about. You cannot avoid that. This is the same is true. So there's the Lötschberg tunnel, which I'm not depicting. It's not as important for passenger rail. There's what is currently being um, planned. I guess this is in blue on the ground that it is under construction, but it's like under construction for the next 15 years. It's a base tunnel. Um, it's supposed to get you from Paris. So you're already getting Paris to Lyon in 2 hours, and then past Lyon, you never stop at Lyon. Such a thing. So like within 2 hours, they're already just past Lyon. And then the idea is that you should be able to do Paris to Torino in 3 hours something, and then to Milan, however long it takes to get from Torino to Milano. Um, so this actually is a really good example of a cross-border rail project that's actually good. Um, the issue is that it's only these extremely expensive projects that are being done, and um, the unfortunate part is that these mixed tunnels, again, here you cannot avoid being mixed across the mountains because you need the freight capacity, and also the fact that you can't climb steep grades doesn't hurt you that much. I mean, the Alps are famously very steep. The Alps famously have very narrow river valleys and mountains that rise very rapidly. The ability to have steeper passenger only grades doesn't really help you, and you still need to build the freight infrastructure. Um, so here, the mixed characteristic is great. In Germany, it is kind of drunk, unfortunately. Um, these are not based on essentially all it does is it forces the lines to be less steep and also have wider curves because they can't super elevate the tracks as much. The minimum curve radius here is 5 kilometers. The minimum curve radius in France on most of the existing lines is 4. France has higher average speed because they super elevate. Um, so the first slide that I'm going to start with, I may have done this, I may have talked about this before, is Dresden to Prague. This is planned as a base tunnel, and this is a terrible idea. Um, so so bear in mind about track and ballast wearing noticeably faster at the bottom that this has not been a problem in France or in Germany. Germany mostly builds shallow next lines, but not always. This line from to Frankfurt is 4%. They have problems with braking, or rather, they say they have problems with braking. I'm pretty sure that if they get so another problem with Germany, I should say, because they can't not slag on German intercity rail planning. So many lines are supposed to be 250 that often they just plan the new lines on 250, and they just bought a massive order of new EMUs at 250 and not 300. And This means that even the 300 km/h lines like this sometimes are going to have 250 trains, and um, the performance is going to suffer. And this is where, if you actually make even rudimentary effort, all of those things that are at this point a little bit slower than half an hour between nodes, like what they're planning for Hannover to Bielefeld, I think it's supposed to be 32 minutes. It can be done in 27. I mean, the Shinkansen, you take the Shinkansen between Nagoya and Kyoto, um, and to be very clear, Nagoya is a both of them are bigger legacy cities than either of these. Um, and you maybe subtract a little bit in the middle at full speed because it's slightly longer segment. Um, you can do this in 27. They're just and honest and the new trains that are getting the Velaro Novo, they can do that. It's just they're assuming they're making extremely conservative assumptions on specs, um, which are somewhat messing the timetable and are also messing the construction. This is the example where Dresden to Praga. The issue is that this is a genuinely busy freight line. I don't think I can do this anymore. From Dresden to Praga, this is a busy freight line up the Elbe, and so they're trying to kill two birds with one stone by building this as a base tunnel. Unfortunately, this is a terrible idea. You can see some of the planned high-speed alignments on this. The reason it's a terrible idea is that it's going to be tens of kilometers of tunnel. And here, and these mountains are not nearly as high or as steep as the Alps, and this means that you can actually do it as two separate lines. You can do it as a passenger-only line that uses steep grades to either fully avoid or almost fully avoid tunneling, roughly along the alignment used by the autobahn. And yeah, you might need to have to cross the 250, not 300, and make small compromises on speed. But guess what? If it's a mixed line, you can't run 300 either way. There's not going to be capacity. And then use the old line for freight on the Chinese system, where the freight gets the old line. If for some reason it's still bad, build another freight line using sharp curves. They can do that. So one of the things I would like to point out with these examples that we do see this good cross-border rail project across the mountain. The Frejus Space Tunnel, which I should probably zoom out a little bit because I don't want to confuse it with random German lines. So I guess it's not being colored as under construction yet, which is weird. They're already doing, I think, engineering on it, maybe not actual boring. It's this line. It's Lyon to Torino. This is the main base tunnel. So they can do big things at cross-border scale. They can do things that don't need to be big but are being made big. That is to say, Dresden to Praga. And unfortunately, yeah, I mean, the um the issue is that it's not a 40 km base tunnel. The Velaro Novo trains do 300. The ITSA 4 is not Velaro Novo. Velaro Novo I don't think the Velaro Novo runs in service. It's just been revealed. Essentially, they're about to get launch customers. The Velaro Novo, it's a train that I especially like, and this is because I do a lot of this to make proposals for the Northeast Corridor in the United States. And for the Northeast Corridor, it's really important to get the best trains that you can, but not be vendor locked. So the Shinkansen trains consistently outperform their European counterparts. And before you ask, yes, when I make the assertion that you can do Bielefeld to Hannover in 27 minutes based on Shinkansen, I'm taking that into account. Because, for example, Nagoya to Kyoto is not a 300 km/h line. It's just been upgraded from 270 to 285 to tilting. So the Shinkansen has much better power to weight ratio than anything in Europe not made by Talgo. Talgo is really weird. For example, the Talgo cannot be an electric multiple unit. It has to be locomotive hold. So 20% of the train's length does not carry passengers. The Talgo I think also doesn't really work with high platforms, only low ones. The northeastern United States is high platform country. Um, the Velaro Novo has specs that start approaching Japanese levels. They're not as good, but they're good enough for a lot of purposes, and they're much more standardized. And essentially, it means that there's actual competition. Now, Japan likes doing turnkeys, but if the U.S. government comes and asks for trains that are slightly resized for the American market, I mean, I don't think they're going to say no. Yeah, using local makes no sense. France keeps using it because they're incredibly conservative about this, and essentially France is a country that coasts on its successes from the 80s and 90s when it comes to intercity rail, and it's really unfortunate. And Spain is entirely EMUs except Tagos, because again, the Tagos actually have good specs. They're just not EMUs. Um, yeah. So the ITSAs here don't accelerate very quickly. Um, Again, the Velaro Novo is capable of that. I think the initial acceleration goes from 0.4 something to 0.7 meters per second square. Bear in mind, the Shinkansen, I don't remember what the domestic ones do, but the export versions are 0.9. Yeah, this is the silly thing. I mean, the lateral acceleration um, is 130 millimeters of cant efficiency. No, lower voltage, 15 kilovolts is not low enough to matter. 3000 volt, like 3000 volt DC, yeah, that's a problem. 15 kilovolt is barely perceptible. Um, yeah, the knock over wine glass is kind of silly, they have, given that there's a regulatory limit for cant efficiency. Usually it's 150 millimeters for non-tilting trains, and at high speed you go down to 130. This is lateral acceleration that's in principle a little more than 0.8 meters per second square, the conversion rate being 150 millimeters equals 1 meter per second square. Um, but no, that barely matters. The power to weight ratio on 15 kilovolt, 16.7 hertz Velaros is fine. I mean, not the best, but it's fine. Um, it's so weird because, as I said, it's 0.8 and a bit meters per second squared in theory. In practice, if your train doesn't tilt, the passengers will always feel lateral acceleration slightly higher than what you think, and the reason is that the train um, is on springs. Um, Let me see if I can find. Suspension is going to be too weird. It's going to be not too weird, too vague. But let me maybe not suspension of a ring. Maybe it's this. Maybe cart suspension. Um, they're not showing me this. Train suspension. The issue is that okay? So if the train hangs, then the suspension works in your favor, but anything else works against you. Essentially, the idea is that the car body feels the lateral acceleration as well and tilts a little bit against you. Active suspension essentially is just a way to countermand that, but that's only on the Shinkansen, not on the trains here, unless they actually tilt, and then it's just really maintenance intensive. The tilting Pendolino is kind of a dead end, technologically. Yeah, the ICE is very slow. It's the timetables here. And again, this is not a cross-border problem. This is a German problem. Germany believes that so in Germany there's something called that I call the argument from Switzerland. This is something that German transport NIMBYs, often members of the Green Party, say we don't need high-speed trains because in Switzerland they don't have them. Well, yeah, Switzerland is a small country, and they say, well, you should invest in reliability. Well, the thing is, the TGV is a more reliable system than the ITSE. There's a Spiegel report, this one, that points out how the TGV has about 11% of buffer time, like 11% pad. By the way, in Switzerland it's 7%. So the TGV is not good, but here, look how bad it is. The Puffer, start from 18, you add another 23 on top of that. That's insane. It's like 25% buffer. It's horrific. Um, and the and this is just again, I don't want it to be to meditate on German planning because there's a cross-border issue here. Um, but the point is that um, completing the high-speed network, so the ITSEs mostly run only on ITSE track and only maybe share tracks in um, like near city, like in the cities. Let's say around Berlin where there's lots of space. In Köln, it's harder in the Hohenzollern-Brücke, but it has six tracks, right? It's fine. Um, Frankfurt's probably a real it is like a real bottleneck, but it's being fixed with a tunnel. Um, Stuttgart is already being fixed with a very expensive tunnel. So um, so it's kind of a weird characteristic where in Germany Germany has spent more than France on high speed trains, on high speed not on high speed railways, but the outcome is less good. To the extent it's improving relative to France, it's because again France is just coasting on 1980s 90s planning, and Germany is doing other things better. And even then, Germany just overtook a couple years ago overtook France on absolute ridership, is still behind per capita. But the point is that with the cross-border issues, um, these are all national networks. The German one, the German one, the French one, um, the upcoming British one. I mean, high speed two. Yeah, it's supposed to, in theory, connect with high speed one, but not really. It's not even going to leave. It's not even going to depart the same station. It's going to depart Euston, and you might say, well, Euston is a historic terminal for trains going northeast. Is it not northeast, northwest of London? And yeah, that's true. I mean, Paris too uses the historic terminals, um, unless you count Montparnasse for transit to destinations, some of which would have used Montparnasse, some of which would have used Austerlitz before the TGV, but everything else, I mean, Gare de Lyon is Gare de Lyon, Gare du Nord is Gare du Nord, Gare de l'Est is Gare de l'Est. And in London, yeah, but even then, they think that they need to add tracks to Euston for capacity. And essentially, it's because they want to fully rebuild the station, and Euston was rebuilt in modernist style in the 1960s, so it's not under historic preservation. And they can't share space with Eurostar at St Pancras, um, because something involving security plus historic preservation. So not built for very good connections. Um, Connections again would probably suffer just because of bullshit security theater, but it's Britain that's driving the security theater. Like Britain is the country that like Britain is the side that insisted on security bullshit and on immigration and passport checks. I mean, the rest of the I mean, before Brexit, the EU would have loved for Britain to join Schengen, for example. Ireland wanted everyone to join Schengen. They like Ireland just wanted to keep the open borders with the UK, and so it was kind of felt forced not to join Schengen. Um, Frankfurt is yeah. There's a Frankfurt 21 tunnel that is being that is in early planning. And but it's not exactly an age issue. It's more it's more way too much mixing of different classes of train on the same track. Um, Something, by the way, Japan does not do very much. The Shinkansen, unless you count the mini Shinkansen, the Shinkansen is hermetically closed. It is hermetically closed for everything else. Um, and the thing is, they're not doing small things. I suspect it's an EU governance issue, where the EU is like a big, like the EU is not a government. This is generally a problem. The EU will step in on very big things. This is something that kind of worries me because it's a little bit like the federal government in the United States, that it will not, that you can't ever involve it in small things. It will just wreck them. With more paperwork for, let's say, bus shelter. Bus shelter is really important. Um, the DC insiders that have, the Washington DC insiders that have talked about this as like maybe a funding priority responded with something soporific about station standards, something like the ability to bore me while talking about public transportation. Like it's so difficult to bore me while talking about public transportation, and yet, and so stuff like bus shelter is being done not even at the state level; it's municipal. Um, Even though it's incredibly important. Um, and it's a little bit like with this, like the EU is not a regular government that you call upon for like routine rail planning. You only call it upon it for very big things. So that would be coordinating base tunnels. Yeah, that'll get EU funding. A lot of stuff in Eastern Europe gets EU funding as cohesion funds. And to the point that essentially Hungary is creating problems for the EU largely out of corruption. Essentially, they like everyone knows that they're corrupt, so the EU is trying to not give them money for this, and Hungary is making the EU not work for things that require unanimous consent until it gets its money that everyone will know will leak to Orban's personal friends. Um, the Poles back them on this just because the Poles want the EU weaker for silly nationalistic reasons. Really, the EU won't, but the EU might at some point tell them to be less anti-Semitic. Um, Except that now the Hungary is also blocking Ukraine money, and it's like a it's like the sweating person with the sweating guy with the two buttons meme. What do the Poles hate more, Putin or the Jews? And apparently they hate Putin more. Um, but anyway, the um, the EU will not do things like get Belgium to build things on its side of the border to run a little faster. This is um, so Belgium again, like Belgium is a small country. We talked about this with the Netherlands. I mean, the DB has a profit. I mean, SNCF has even been more has a bigger profit motive. Like SNCF, I think SNCF is at this point under greater privatization threat than DB. Um, like SNCF, so SNCF does not have the ability to make sustained profits because the cheminots will capture everything, but it does have the ability to break even, and it is expected to break even or at least be slow or even be slightly profitable. And a lot of its moves in the last 10 years have been to try to be more profitable by imitating low cost airlines. And it has completely failed because trains are not planes. So things like having separate trains for the rich and the poor, and the rich people trains go to Paris and the poor people trains go to Marne-la-Vallée. Um, that was supposed to increase ridership by creating more tiers of rail traffic, so that it would be possible to have low cost trains without breaking the high cost, without breaking the, I shouldn't say high cost because treasury prices even in the high cost market are not high. Without breaking the normal cost market. It didn't work because Marne-la-Vallée is not Paris, 1,000 people get off at TGV, all trying to buy train tickets to on the RER. It's just the delay for buying a connecting ticket was 20 minutes, and then another 20, 30 minutes to get from Alnavale to city center. So essentially, revenue fell, ridership did not increase. Um, but they did not defer maintenance. Um, a lot of like usually when people say maintenance backlog, what they mean is we cry poverty whenever there's money. Sorry, we cry poverty whenever there's money and try to hog other people's money. We defer maintenance when there's no money. It's a very American thing. Um, yeah, the existence laws being online languaging in France, but also except the ones that have through service to the TGV. Remember, France has more ridership per capita than Germany. France near ties on passenger kilometer model split. Um, it's on near tied for second. It's somewhat behind Austria and the Netherlands, but not far behind them. Switzerland's by far number one. Like the TGV network has a lot of good things about it. Usually the oh my god, the slow trains are being how much Paris queues, what's that? The model split, it's passenger kilometer model split, so it's specifically not really about urban travel. If you're looking at let's say work trip model split, France and Germany before Corona were the same. They were both about 16 or 17%. Um, Britain, I think, the same. Like Britain in the 2011 census, I think England and Wales were 15%. Scotland probably less, but not a lot of people live in Scotland. Um, it would have increased by 2019, and then Corona happened, so the snapshot is 2021, where it's much less because work from home disproportionately affected transit users and not drivers. Um, and and also generally the sort of people who are the most careless about Corona also drive everywhere. Um, but anyway, um, the reliability mostly means not forcing any set to share tracks with slow regional. And again, the EU. I mean, the EU can't make Germany better. That is the problem. The EU can't make France better. The EU can't even make France. Like the EU has this open access mandate, which France flagrantly violates, and the EU does. The EU probably would like to do something about it, but they don't feel like they can compel us and staff to do anything. Um, and and again, part of it is the EU doesn't like governing. The governing ideology for the EU is EPP, is the EPP version of the New Right, in which the government um, doesn't govern but nudges. Um, it's like a little bit of Thatcherite New Right, a little bit of Blairite Third Way. The government doesn't do, the government only nudges. Um, so the government is not actually going to plan the trains. The government is going to pretend that it's a free market in infrastructure. It obviously isn't, but it pretends it is, and then tries to set up an open access system in the same way that the roads are the owners of a toll road don't operate the buses on the road, let alone the cars that you drive on individually. This is not how trains actually work. Switzerland does not do any of that. Switzerland integrates this. The Swiss version of the New Right is profoundly different. It's like the negotiations have not privatized the state in any way. Um, but instead, the EU has this privatization of it, which, to be very clear, it's not something the EU imposes on other countries. Although other countries accept that to the extent that good infrastructure programs exist, they're just a lot of them are remnants. This is a bad thing. I mean, this is related to the long-term growth in construction costs in places that are slowly privatizing the state that didn't used to. Um, the Nordic countries are a big example. The Netherlands, I think France is getting that bug as well. Um, and for example, it's not happening in Italy and in France because they just haven't modernized a lot of things, most of which are wrecking their economies. They also haven't learned that you're supposed to not have in-house infrastructure construction, but contract everything out to private consultants. So they are capable of building infrastructure to their very weak economies. And so the cross-border rail issue, because it's not the government that governs the EU, it can't actually do long-term planning of, let's say, building two lines here to save money. They're not under any pressure to save money. Um, there's no such thing as a transparent EU tax. Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. I mean, a lot of Lexit people in Britain, like, I don't know if Corbyn himself pretended he supported Remain, but a lot of, and I know that, for example, Momentum and Rebecca Long Bailey were very, I'm concerned I got someone wrong, um, were very pro canceling Brexit, but the kind of older generation of alt left, that is to say Corbyn himself, they have this kind of bullshit about how the EU is imposing privatization on Britain, which is the other way around. The EU learned privatizing the state from Britain. The kind of growing model of privatization of the state that we are seeing here is a model deeply inspired by Britain. The pan EU identity is in many ways a reflection of the kind of very globalized London identity. It's just one that, instead of seeing its centers as London, Dubai, Singapore, and Hong Kong, they see their centers, the users of their centers, London, Paris, Frankfurt, Munich, Brussels, and Amsterdam. London is now dropping off of that, but it's kind of the same. And um, and you would expect that maybe left-wing parties would push back on it, but no, they don't, because the new left hates the idea of big infrastructure and top-down planning. The Green Party has been a disaster on this in Germany. From time to time, the SPD have a good idea on this, but again, it's like very much a remnant of something, rather than anything that moves forward. Like the SPD that moves forward in Germany would be, for example, YIMBY. They are trying to be YIMBY on housing. This is moving forward. But on like infrastructure, not really. Um, and um, and the result is that small things like making sure that Belgium actually is completionist on these lines that, to be fair, are not that important for domestic Belgian rail traffic. I mean, speeding up the trains um, between Brussels and Antwerpen, it's nice, but they're so close to each other that the that Belgium has more interest in doing other things, like connecting to secondary cities, like make sure that, let's say, that Brugge. Okay, people who actually are from Belgium. The Green Party UK. Yeah, the Green Party UK is fucking terrible. I mean, the Green Party here, which is actually very good on most things, um, e.g. Ukraine. But the Green Party in the UK is like for people who don't like to govern. The Green Party here is for people who would like to govern and just don't have very good ideas on transportation. But anyway, so also Belgians, let me know if I'm mispronouncing like Flemish when I'm calling the city Brugge. Like, is it Brugge? I don't know. I'm not going to call it Bruges because it is not a French city. So in Brugge, or Ghent, like making sure that they connect better. This is really important for Belgium. But for through service, what you need is to speed this up, and that is unfortunately not being done. Same thing for Brussels to Leuven. Currently, all the no, actually, no, the trains don't all stop at Leuven. I think the international ones skip Leuven, but there's also no need for them to. build a high-speed line that skips Leuven because all the domestic trains do stop at Leuven. Um, and the upshot is that this is an actual high-speed line with worse average speed than many upgraded low-speed lines like Berlin to Hamburg, Stockholm to Stockholm to Göteborg and Malmö. Um, Certainly the fastest ones in Britain, so London to Manchester, Liverpool, and York and Leeds might actually be not that much faster than London to Bristol, which is insane. Um, Green Party Germany is not actually bad for energy. Green Party Germany, people overrate the extent to which nuclear power was ever important in Germany. Like the Green Party in Germany was bad for energy in the 1980s. The Remember in 2022, I don't know about the second half of the year. In the first half of 2022, about half of German electricity was produced by carbon-free sources. Um, the wind revolution here is real. The Greens are not the obstacle to that. This is something where there's a lot of NIMBYs, all of whom are on the right. Bavaria is terrible. CSU has been terrible in this. Um, Nuclear power was never as important to Germany as it is to France. Um, and yeah, in France, the Green Party has been bad, but in France, the Green Party has never been important. Like they participate in center-left primaries, but for example, their support of socialist governments, let's say in the Hollande era, did not actually get to any denuclearization. Nor to their more unhinged ideas like slowing down all the TGVs to 200 kilometers an hour because there's less air resistance than when you go 300. There's also less air resistance if you run fewer trains because people have moved away from the trains because they're too slow and are back driving or flying. But it's a party that supported the Gilets jaunes. What the hell do you expect? But anyway, the issue is that you can do small things like get Belgium to fix this and this. It can't do small things like actually get the cross-border timetables to align. Um, it can't do small things like building again small cross-border things. The other example that really frustrates me is Frankfurt to Saarbrücken. This is something that is kind of valuable even domestically. Um, in Germany, it's just that um, this is incredibly fast. Paris to Strasbourg. Right now, Paris to Saarbrücken. Saarbrücken. I don't know whether they say but like how Bavarian I should make my accent for it. Paris to Saarbrücken is an hour 47. This is with this part being slow, but this is very fast. And then Saarbrücken to Frankfurt is another 2 hours. This again could be done in 45 minutes is optimistic, but an hour is pessimistic. Um, and this is even via Mainz. This is um, a problem because again, it's a line that has domestic uses, but it's mostly to get people from Paris to Frankfurt and to Berlin faster. Um, and again, this is small. It's not the only connection from France to Germany. Thalys does this already. This is not going to get you to Köln faster than this. This is not going to get you to Munich faster than the existing stuff here. Paris to Munich. It's specifically about getting you to Frankfurt, Berlin, and stuff. And I mean, these are not small cities. These are not unimportant cities. Paris to Frankfurt now is 4 hours. It could be reduced to two and a half ish, maybe a little bit more, less than 3. Um, Paris to Berlin, if all of this is built, These are not especially optimistic numbers. Maybe Berlin to Erfurt in an hour, but even that is doable. It's like 240 kilometers, I think. Um, so that's Paris to Berlin in less than 5 hours, and right now with the transfers, it's 8. Um, People fly between Paris and Berlin. Um, the sort of Yeah, exactly. The small things are exactly, and the most important thing is to speed up the slowdowns. Um, this is where I keep talking about how in the United States, for example, trains between New York and Point North on Metro North, so not New York to Boston on Amtrak, which is Penn Station, but the commuter trains north of New York. Um, the last mile into Grand Central, it's something that could be done in 2 minutes very easily. A minute is ambitious. With um, with the bumper, these are bumper tracks. The switches are very slow. Doing it in 2 minutes is easy. It's done in 6. 10 miles an hour speed limit. Um, so the most important thing that can be done to, let's say, speed up trains to New Haven or actual suburbs north of New York is to speed this up, is to essentially fix this. But that's not being done. And it's not being done because first of all, it's not very flashy. Second, it's construction within New York City. So Connecticut would not care. Connecticut would prefer construction to be in Connecticut. Um, Maybe the northern suburbs of New York would care because it's in state. It doesn't matter if it's suburb or city for them, but they don't think about it as much. Plus, a lot of accumulated in America, there's this problem with railroaders having accumulated a century of knowledge that is almost entirely wrong about what trains can and cannot do. Um, which we see shades of a little bit here, where they say that you just can't do Hannover to Bielefeld in less than half an hour, where I'm literally looking at Shinkansen schedules and I'm subtracting out the extra length, except that I'm prorating that at the highest speed, so I'm subtracting the least amount of time, and I get 27. Or you see this with high speed 2. A lot of the extra spending on high speed 2 is because they just got lazy about using station tracks in the most efficient way. Because they saw, we don't do it in Europe, therefore we can't. Except they do it in Japan when they need to, in Tokyo. Um, but again, other than so for high speed 2, it's a huge cost driver, but in continental Europe, it's not actually. I mean, again, it's annoying. It's not. It's not the American. Even Britain, it's not the American amateur hour. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the maintenance. Yeah, the fact that the maintenance practices in America, as I said, a century of accumulated knowledge is almost entirely wrong. Um, I constantly break Americans' brains when I show them how within the same uh, footprint, a German, that is to say European, that is to say the entire world outside North America, um, railway switch can boost your speeds by a factor of about 1.5, and there are some excessively conservative limits there anyway because there was an accident there once 50 years ago, and they reduced speeds because it's kind of a safety theater. It's a little bit like you make people take off their shoes at the airport, not because it actually enhances safety. Basically, all the security red team people think of that as complete bullshit. Um, but because there was a shoe bomber once, never mind it. Upon follow up, it turned out that if first of all, the shoe bomb did not go off because passengers stopped them. Way more important than anything else. Secondarily, on follow up, it turned out that if the bomb had exploded, it would have killed the passenger. It would have been a suicide attack. The passenger next to the shoe bomber would also have died. The bombing would not, as I remember, I think it was I forget if it in the B or in the Guardian, but the plane, it would have, it would have, I think it would have broken the window, so there would have been depressurization, but the plane would have landed safely. There would have been oxygen masks. Passengers in other seating rows, I imagine, would have survived because the seats on an airplane are like, I mean, the airplanes don't like the airlines don't like giving you shit legroom, right? I mean, they would do seats that are this thin if they could, but they have to make the seats into Kevlar fire bricks. And it's not Germany in general, it's culturalism. All of Northern Europe refuses to learn from all of Southern Europe. This is a big problem with construction costs. This is why Sweden is learning British practices, leading its cost to rise sharply. In Norway, costs have tripled in the last, I think, 10 years, from just about the lowest in the world to still well below global averages. Yeah, they said that dwell times would be too high if they did through stations. Okay, first of all, in Shinosaka, the dwell time is 1 minute. Second, even if you do a terminal, I mean, you could do a terminal at Birmingham using the existing tracks. Yeah, exactly. Like the UK is probably the country most ready to essentially bring back the state. Essentially, it just boils down to whether one person whose name is Keir Starmer is going to do it. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Who the fuck knows? The fact that he's saying nice things about Prime Minister Wilson, that I want to say that it fills me with confidence. However, Wilson was also literally the last elected Labour Prime Minister before Blair, so it's kind of by default that every Labour leader is going to say that they like Wilson. I think. I mean, what are they going to say they like Blair about? That he eventually left office, thankfully. I mean, not saying that he was replaced by, a notable Iraq War opponent or something, but yeah, I mean, the engineers in the UK are very good. Like, it's this annoying thing where in, again, in Britain, they are ready to do better. In Britain, TfL has a lot of in-house expertise, not enough to build Crossrail, unfortunately, so they did a special purpose delivery vehicle. And but for example, New York has by far the world's worst construction costs and also some of the worst operating costs. London does not have high operating costs. I mean, it's stiff competition for number two, but it's not it's not FPTP. It's not about FP. It's not about the voting system. So it's not the voting system. Remember that like it looks like the voting system because essentially every other country that has this voting system speaks English, so they all learn from each other. But it's not the voting system. New Zealand does not have that voting system and has had the exact same problem. And the so the issue with this is that the wait Berlin does not have a capacity problem at Hauptbahnhof. Berlin has a not enough people want to ride through Hauptbahnhof problem. I don't think people perceive Hauptbahnhof Tief to be at capacity. In fact, they're trying to move more traffic to Hauptbahnhof Tief away from Hauptbahnhof. I don't know what the like how to call the elevated Hauptbahnhof. They just call it Berlin Hauptbahnhof or Berlin Hauptbahnhof Tief. They're actually trying to move more. Um, they're trying to move. So in Berlin, some of the intercities go like this. Some go like this, and they're trying to move all of these trains, like the trains from Köln, from this route to this route to Tief. The trains only go here not because of capacity limitations here. No, they're aware that this is grossly underfull. The reason they still have some trains going like this, first of all, some of them go via Potsdam, but also, more importantly, the rail yard only connects to the Stadtbahn, so they want to use these rail yards. I think for the same reason the intercities also stop at Ostbahnhof and not Ostkreuz. I mean, it's good for me to stop at Ostbahnhof. I live near Ostbahnhof, but probably for the rest of the city, it would be better to stop at Ostkreuz instead. But it's not a like Germany does not have that capacity problem. I mean, we just have enough tracks that were overbuilt from time to time. I guess we're still, but It's not, but it's not like Britain, which is spending, you know, £1 billion on Birmingham. Ooh, please do send it about TIFF because I'm really interested. Um, but anyway, with the cross-border stuff, again, it's small things. Small things don't excite people. So the way it works, so I'll tell you how it works in America. In America, the way it works is that the politicians run against the government, and I don't just mean Republicans. I mean every politician. It's like a rite of passage of shitting on everyone shitting on the entire government. For example, it is typical to run against your own consultants. It's like everyone knows that you're hiring consultants. Everyone knows that you're gonna keep that you're gonna, for the most part, say what the pollsters tell you, but they keep saying, well, the consultants say yes, but they don't understand real America or real whatever state that the politician is in. It's constant delegitimization of the actual instruments of governance, the actual instruments of politics. Um, there's no the even to some extent the police is insulated from this. Politicians don't run against the police. They don't run against firefighters. They don't run against teachers. They do underpay teachers, but they don't run against teachers. But they absolutely will run against any other instrument of governance. And portray and essentially create a civil service that is the equivalent of a coup-proof military, in where leaders who are afraid of military coups have a bunch of ways to make the military not coup them. And usually the way that yeah, yeah, they were trying to be too ambitious with the new tech with electrification. That said, British rail electrification costs, they're higher than here. The difference is not entirely, but most of it is the low arch bridges, which require them to essentially invent surge arresters to the point that Britain can actually wire under, like, can wire with less clearance than Germany. Germany says that if you're doing 25 kilovolts, you need 27 centimeters of static clearance between the wire and fixed structures. If you're doing 15, you need 15 centimeters. In Britain, they're electrifying 25 kilovolts, but it's 20 centimeters, not 27. And this can even be waived with surge arresters. Um, but the but essentially that is, it's not the only problem. Britain does have higher unit costs than, let's say, Italy, especially, or Norway. Maybe more like the upper end of continental Europe. Like, let's say Denmark has had high electrification costs because they stopped and restarted and stopped and restarted. If they did at least one cycle of stop and restart, I think that it might have actually done two. Um, but Britain, and then you see stuff like, and then you see the mega projects like Crossrail and Omega. Um, yeah, and bear in mind, the Americans and the Canadians can't electrify even at Great Western Main Line costs with a loading gauge that's multiple feet larger than the British one. Um, um, and so I think like 2 feet or something. And so yeah, it's all of it is small stuff, and to do the small stuff, you need to trust the civil service. And I'm giving this military analogy because it's very common in armies that are afraid of coups to destroy the authority of field and junior officers, or historically not to even develop it. Um, so I was actually told on Macedon, I don't remember if it was Diego or Tony, who pointed out that France was coup-proofing the military in the 1930s by requiring all officers to receive assent from high up for any initiative that they were trying to take. Uh, so I have no idea what oh, if you know Polish electrification costs, please do send me. I don't know what they are. In India, institutionally, the issue is that electrification is a domestic project. They're now trying to privatize the state to Japan. Then the stuff that India does privatize to Japan, like high-speed rail, is extremely expensive because Japan knows how to build in Japanese environments and not in other ones. Um, yeah, the United States has been spending 15 years doing that already, and so far everything it's learned has been negative. Like it's learned negative things at this point. Like the U.S. knows less about high-speed rail now than it did 15 years ago. Because 15 years ago it was willing to look abroad. Today it no longer is. Um, yeah, yeah, exactly. The right, but I mean Germany had conscription as well. Um, but Germany also believed in like letting the military show initiative. There were fights about this in the 1930s with Nazis who were trying to like also Nazify the military, and they lost. Unfortunately, because then the Wehrmacht would have been less effective. But the um so essentially Germany and then the US and the UK developed Mission Command, where you actually let junior officers and field grade officers show more initiative, and this is how you have a more. This is how you have a good modern military. Um, so when you don't do that, you do things like, let's say, in Arab armies, it's very common to only invest in like the elite. Maybe it's from the same milieu as the president, and then the normal troops. When the president shows up, their guns are without firing pins because just to make sure. Essentially, you keep telling the troops that they're worthless. You don't let them show any initiative unless the high up tells them, and then you're surprised why a country with, I think Israel had maybe 2 million people at the time or 3 million people at the time, can just randomly walk all over your army. Um, the civilian analogy is that the civil service in the United States, and again, there are echoes of that in Britain and in the Netherlands, but in the United States, it's really bad. The politicians constantly run on delegitimizing the civil service. Um, Essentially, the American system is the civil service has to go through intentionally impossible red tape. Um, it's kind of like EU accession. Like they keep burying countries in red tape so that they will never actually be able to do this. It's kind of a hostile environment. And then um, the only way things work is with fast track. Fast track is a political decision. A political appointee might sign off. This is how the vaccines in the United States were. Like they waived a lot of the bullshit regulatory requirements, but they didn't realize, wait, we don't need these anymore. Let's repeal them. No, they keep them because they don't want the civil service to. They don't want the CDC to accidentally get ideas that maybe they're actual experts on preventing infectious diseases. No, someone who's a political appointee has to approve it. Um, and yeah, it makes it it's impossible to do small things. It also separately makes it impossible to do big things because of political extraction issues. But nobody in first world countries going to learn from China, even at that meta level, is a problem. Um, but oh wow, yeah, yeah. And so the small stuff. Um, so we have actually functional civil services here. That can do small things. Um, they can do small things because again, because of their existing expertise. Politicians tend to back them less, more so maybe in France and in Germany. In Germany, it depends on who the conflict is with, but often politicians will back NIMBYs. Um, but the civil service gets more respect here. So things that are done at the level uh, of an engineer at Deutsche Bahn who's my age, they can get done. Um, but never cross border. This is something that very sharply terminates a country's borders, even if it's two countries that are very close to each other culturally, like France and Belgium. This is why Thales charges way higher rates Paris to Brussels than domestic Toulouse does. Like there was never there's never this kind of internal thing with the SNCF that they need to actually provide service for everyone. It's just bean counting. Um, Likewise, in Germany, yeah, they're starting to finally plan stuff to Switzerland, but it's very halting. It's just to Basel, which is not the main center of gravity of Switzerland. There's nothing being planned to Zurich, which would require something like this. This is a high-speed line. It's not being planned. Nobody's planning this. This is something that's gonna like. This is already under construction to Augsburg. This should be. This I can see happening. München to Ingolstadt completionism. This I can see happening. This should happen, but it's kind of speculative because people think that 200 kilometers an hour is good enough. This is starting to happen, and this will eventually happen. Not up to Dortmund, but to Unna. Again, not Unna, Hamm. This is what I think they should be doing, but they're not doing that. Um, Again, this and this are about to flip to blue. This I'm about to drop. These I think are being planned. This might be speculative, but this is just on nobody's radar. Um, Even though it's Switzerland, even though it's German-speaking Switzerland, it's a lot of greenfield construction. It will require tunneling. It also gets a connection between all of Germany and Zurich. Um, and because it's a fast connection, also gets you across the Alps. Um, I guess they're trying to do this. This is being built. Quite a lot of the approaches are being discussed, at least. It's just um, this would be the main route. And again, it's not being done because they don't think in terms of how can we build trains that can actually get from southern Germany to Italy. They don't think that. To the extent someone thinks that it's the sort of environmentalists who will also write this if it's a night train. So yeah, there are all these plans to do a pan-European network of night trains, but essentially they're trying to replicate things that already existed in Europe in the 1960s and 70s, things like Trans-Europe Express, like that network, and do it a little bit better. Well, I think it's this one. Yeah, um, this was supposed to be a big thing. It just, um, why would I mean? Then mass air travel became a thing, and car ownership grew from probably about half of Europe in the 50s to half of Western Europe in the 50s to nearly everyone. And it's a little bit like when American foamers, they should call them, are trying to restore the intercity rail network of the 1950s and 60s. Like, move the hell on. And so, because it's a lot of it is people with a lot of nostalgia for trains, for the old days of trains. You can even find people who like that they used to be able to ride trains by today's standards are cheap and probably by the standards of income then we're not. But a bohemian who had like a history degree when like very few people had degrees could feel like they're not educational elite when they absolutely were, I guess. Um, and to be very clear, when I say bohemian, I don't mean pony. I mean like bohemian, like little b. Um, and yeah, this is the other issue. Um, and the that stuff just for passenger rail. I mean, yeah, there are foamers who want this. They're right. I mean, I think it's more important to get this done and do it right, but this is not bad. Like, I mean, I slag on Bavaria all the time, but it has an economy. I mean, I'd say, but it has an economy as if I'm not talking about this about a place that's a lot wealthier than the city that I live in, right? I mean, but I mean, they have a very wealthy economy. Those filthy BMW drivers and anti-vaxxer, anti-win NIMBYs. Um, it's useful to connect with this, and I mean, this also gets you to Frankfurt, for example. It's just, I don't want to call this little. It's a big project. It's just a project that is not generational. You can't pretend it's going to be transformational for all of Europe the way that the Gotthard-based tunnel actually is, and the way that Brenner and the way that Brenner and that Frisch's aren't, but could plausibly be sold as. Like, these are not bad projects. This and this. It's just um, they're big, they're good. I'm glad they're being done, both of them. It's just if the EU has money to like or organizational um chops to coordinate with the member states, and if the member states have the ability to build this, they can build this. They can build this. They can build this. Austria does not have a high-speed rail network. They have medium speed. Austria's size is such that it could use high speed domestically. It's not as compact as the Netherlands, but it's still not marginal, but it's uncertain. But they absolutely should be thinking about connecting to Prague. To, I mean, Bratislava is like so close to Vienna, they don't even. It's just mostly just through service. But I mean, or to München. Um, Instead, Austria's insistence that all passengers must reserve a seat actually would fuck up the trains between München and Zurich, because the little section through Austria forces everyone to reserve a seat instead of just buying standing tickets. Like, and this is normal in both Germany and Switzerland. It's kind of ridiculous. But again, these organizational things and actually governing, the EU doesn't do. I mean, they do a lot of standardization on things like Euro pallets. So, like, this is stuff that the EU does do, not European Army, but EU are palette fat. So they will standardize these, which is really nice. They will not actually have a railway or anything that looks like a railway or anything that is like a kind of Verkehrsverbund where you integrate the timetables between different where you integrate the timetables between different countries, and that is the big problem. It's not high speed two is not just NIMBY. I mean, the children's tunnels are a big problem, but the oversized stations in Birmingham, for example, that's not NIMBY. That's unwillingness to learn from how Japan makes use of very constrained space. It's a little bit like it's the evil twin of early commitment. If you commit too early, the project will be politicized, as the as just as site was. Conversely, if you wait too long until you actually build, you're also going to get politicization because the project is going to be so obviously good that everyone will want a piece of it, and it's going to be very difficult to walk away from surplus extraction. This is the high speed to a problem. You should do what Taiwan and South Korea did, and build high speed rail when you can, not when it's so obviously a good proposition that everyone supports it. You should be sometimes willing to make fiscal conservatives cry a little bit. Unfortunately, Taiwan has been in this kind of weird situation of making fiscal conservatives cry, but at the same time having the new right forcibly privatize a lot of state planning. Yeah, ERTMS. Yeah, so stuff that is so stuff like common standards the EU does, but you can't do railways through common standards. Railways are not Linux. Railways are not Mastodon. Railways require actual top-down planning to coordinate. I mean, the top-down plan doesn't have to be subordination to one central agency. It can be, I don't want to say horizontal relationships, but they can be. I mean, like stuff like negotiations between RATPS and SNCF, where there was a kind of implicit top-down threat there. One of their heads who didn't want to coordinate lost his job, and I think it was 50s or 60s in the run-up to building the RER. Essentially, these are both owned by the French state, so that coordination existed. Or the Verkehrsverbund in the Verkehrsverbund here. There's I don't know if there's an implied threat in Berlin about getting BFG and Deutsche Bahn to coordinate, but in Switzerland, the federal government said that if Zurich wants more money for infrastructure, they should like maximize, which is what they have, and integrate the different operators in the canton better. Yeah, exactly. The technical people are always good at this. And this is a really good thing about Europe specifically because in the United States, as I mentioned, in mainline rail, quite a lot of technical people just know wrong things. Usually the older ones, the younger ones are better. It's not a purely American thing in Germany too. Though. There's kind of problem where a recent master's grad often knows more than their manager because their manager knows things that haven't been true for 30 years. Um, and the and in like at EU level again, I'm portraying this as like a high speed rail crayon. Much of it is not about like the full crayon. Um, Much of it is about like trying to figure out individual connections that would work and are underrated. I would say probably I don't want to say that completing this link for Paris to Frankfurt is the most important. I'm guessing if you're gone too hard, the most important is the most important red stuff that's cross border that needs to be done is probably this and this for Thalys, but that would presumably also require ending this extraction from passengers where the fares on Thalys are like twice as high as on domestic high speed trains, um, which is essentially a commitment to instead of trying to work as airline style competition to have the state provide good services to the population, which is again not something that the sort of Thatcherites and Blairites who run the EU ever think in terms of, but that's how high speed rail has been built. That's how rapid transit beyond the first few disconnected London lines has been built. That's how infrastructure generally is built. Um, and the So again, this is the thing that maybe is most important to me personally. So maybe I'm somewhat overrating it. It's bear in mind, it's important. I will not argue that this is. I will argue very strenuously that this is important to include in even a rudimentary map. This is the first. This is my first instinct of what is most important, but that's because I lived in Paris and I live in Berlin, as opposed to like a kind of more typical Eurocrat stays a lot around EU institutions, and these tend to be in like Middle Francia, um, like lots of Brussels. I don't even know where they are in the Netherlands, Maastricht or something. Strasbourg, like Luxembourg, like these kinds of places. Maybe Frankfurt. I don't actually know if Frankfurt could not possibly have been Middle Francia, right? Frankfurt was like in East France, yeah, right? Because like all of East, like because like the Carolingian Empire didn't even go to East Germany. Like the Carolingian Empire was basically modern day France, northern Italy, Switzerland, Benelux, and Cold War West Germany or something. Kind of ridiculous, but it's like that. Like it's kind of this tranche is where the Eurocrats are. So maybe this actually is more important, and I'm just not thinking about it because I'm not a real Eurocrat. Um, in many ways, this would be nice, yeah. But it always, yeah, upgrade the slow bit is always the most important. I despair at how slow the Hohenzollern is. Like this one. Uh, Maybe I should do something that's continuously zoomable. Yes, the Hohenzollern. Also, for fuck's sake, stop naming things after like mass murdering monarchs. But I mean, um, that would require people here to actually form a consensus that the French Revolution was a good thing, which even in France they don't. Like it's kind of ridiculous. The LR wanted to do a resolution commemorating something, the massacre in the Vendée or it's genocide or something. Um, and not, literally any other massacre by the royals, of whom there were very many. Both many royals and many massacres. But anyway, so this is a very slow bridge, unfortunately. Bear in mind, once you pass the bridge, you can go pretty fast. Um, but yeah, this is a problem. Um, and I don't quite get why, because it's not just that it's curvy. I mean, is it curvy? Yes. Is it 30 kilometers an hour curvy? No. I mean, I guess if you can like reliably hit 80, that should be good enough though. The 30 here is kind of ridiculous. Um, Again, 80 like adjacent to the city to a city, it's fine. Um, why Köln roar on the left bank? The switches are not slow. These are German switches. These are not. Why does it matter if it's 1 kilometer from the platform? Because if you're 30, then it's 2 minutes to that kilometer. That should be less than one. Um, it's not the switches. It's the bridge. And it's the curve. It's specifically the curve of the bridge. I suspect they're just. I suspect just a flat curve as opposed to a super elevated one. Why couldn't? Yeah, you can have slow switches, but the issue is, but the switches are not the problem. Um, why Köln who on the left bank? Uh, what do you mean? Like this? Like Köln is this? Like this is not the Köln line. The Köln line is something that I need to add to the map, but it's blue because it already exists. It is this. The purpose of this line, like this thing to get to Düsseldorf is a little drunk. It needs to be killed, but you can absolutely do spoke. Um, like this is like half an hour. You can do not do spoke. You can do this in half an hour. It should be fine. It's not especially high speed. This weird line is to get you from Köln to the Netherlands. Like the issue is that there's kind of weird branching issue where where the Rhine Roar has so many different centers that everything that hits it east west needs to have reverse branches to Duisburg, like to the Roar proper, to Düsseldorf, and to Köln. And essentially, this is what it is here. So, like from the Netherlands, it needs to be something like this. Right now, they don't do it. Like right now, because the trains are slow, it's like each line runs on a separate line because when all the trains are equally slow, you take the most direct route. So you don't do Berlin, Amsterdam like this. You do Berlin, Amsterdam like this. Um, and but if you start doing something fast, you need to have somewhat compromised routes. And then the question is, do you try to go via Duisburg and then maybe slow down? Or I'm guessing this is the best because you're still, yeah, this is kind of second because it's not the best for Berlin, but it does get you it's up the Rhine the most effectively. And the issue is that so many fucking people live here um, that if the trains here are actually fast, you need to worry about capacity. And this is where you need to actually have an all high speed route to avoid having to use congested lines like Köln to Duisburg, like I think it's RRX now. Like you need to avoid using them just because you're gonna have capacity problems. This again, a little bit here, it's drunk, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but probably even something that bypasses Frankfurt via the airport, like the trains do today, like the frequencies are going to be so high that I mean, you're still dumping a very large amount of traffic into Frankfurt Hauptbahnhof and also on the bypass. This is so 6 million people live in Holland, a million point something in around Utrecht. Um, you're picking up a bunch of North Brabant here on the way. It's like we're talking 10 million people. The 10 million people are not one monocentric city where you're serving city center, but people need to go long distance to get there. These are a bunch of centers, all of which are served. So Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht. I guess Den Haag maybe is a little harder to get to, but I mean, okay. I mean, it's even hard. I mean, I guess it's even harder for like dictators to get to go to Den Haag. So, um, then stuff like Tilburg-Bosch, Eindhoven, all of this stuff is on the way, and all of these centers again with their surroundings are something like 10 million people. Um, yeah, that's the why Eindhoven and not Arnhem? Um, I can see it going via. I can see it's doing like this. The main reason is that I want to enter from the west to avoid because let's look for a sec at the current state of the track. This is we're getting into a little more crayon than I intended, but a lawn goes off topic, and a lawn stream goes off topic. That's like the sign of the apocalypse that never happens. Yeah. Um, the Rhine roar is kind of F-shaped. This is the vertical notch of the F, and these are the two horizontal notches. And um, if you're trying to hit it from the west, you and you want to be able to get through efficiently, you want to hit Düsseldorf and not Duisburg, because if you hit Duisburg, you're not going to be able to get further south unless you build an entirely new line, because this is way too built up. Whereas if you whereas if you get to Düsseldorf, then you can actually go on the left bank of the Rhine like this and have relatively unbuilt areas. That's the reason. Um, yeah, Den Haag is only hard to get to. Mostly Den Haag is also is hard to get to because um, it takes something like 50,000 years to actually indict someone for war crime. Um, but anyway, like it's really hard because it's really hard to indict. So it goes like this. You can't indict you can't very efficiently indict African dictators there, and the reason is that African dictators mostly kill other Africans. The people who are in Den Haag only care about African lives in the abstract. Um, you can't usually indict European dictators because they're European. So you need to dance along the edges. So a lot of Bosnian war genocide, like Serbian genocide, there's generally you can because they're sufficiently on the margin that it's okay to actually put them in prison and the people they killed. I mean, they're Muslim. They're like here they're very well integrated Muslims. They're still Muslim enough that the EU is trying to impose the most ridiculous restrictions on Bosnia if it wants to join ever, which it does. Uh, but it's close enough that it actually matters if there's a massacre. So this is the issue with Den Haag. But anyway, this is why I'm entering from here and from here. I mean, all of these choices also need to be studied. Just I think about this because I'm worried in the future about capacity. Because again, 10 million people ish. The Rhine roar is about 11. Um, Frankfurt, Mainz, like that area is about 5 or 6. The Rhein-Neckar is another almost 3. Karlsruhe is 1. Stuttgart is 2.5. Or I should say 2.5 when I'm saying this is 3. Stuttgart is like they're both 2.7. I'm just probably not around in the opposite directions or something. München is another 3. This is maybe less dense, but I mean all of this area is very high density. Like along the I shouldn't say the Rhineland because usually when people say Rhineland they mean this specific region, but like the areas along the Rhine, they're just a very high population density, lots of cities that are not on a very neat linear card like the northeastern United States cities, Boston, Providence, and even New York, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, Washington, not like that, or like the Shinkansen cities, like from Tokyo to honestly, to Fukuoka, but close enough that you can actually, with one trunk line, and again, some deviations serve that, and that's going to be very high traffic if the speeds are high, which are not, and if the frequencies are high, which are also not. That's the issue with cross-border rail, and it's especially frustrating here because it's not a base tunnel. Like, I'm pretty sure that the cost of all the red stuff around here um, is less than the cost of one base tunnel, right? Because let me actually check this. Let me see if Fujitsu's base tunnel will actually get me to where I want. Nope, it's Fujitsu's rail apostrophe. So it's rail. It's the rail tunnel, and um, oh, because they're not called. It's not called the Fujitsu base tunnel. It's called the Montempa. Yeah, it has an estimated cost of 8 billion euros. They're already. I mean, it's been in some kind of work for 20 years. It's been in physical work for about 4. When are they saying it's going to open? Are they saying when it's going to open? They're not actually saying when it's going to open. That is very nice. The estimated cost of the line, including the surface connections, which I really need to stop depicting in red when they're already under construction, is 25 billion. Okay. Um, let's look at this for a moment. Okay. Um, this is mostly Köln to Amsterdam is the new stuff. Or to Utrecht, probably like Utrecht Amsterdam is not like actual high speed territory in any way. Um, so this, and it's not the most direct things that it's going to have a few deviations, but it's 180, so let's say 200 kilometers. It doesn't cost 100 million euros per kilometer to build high speed rail, even in the Netherlands, let alone in Germany. Um, this is remember, this is the Netherlands, which the name of the country might tell you something about how much tunneling is needed. They did do tunneling on high speed trains between Rotterdam and Amsterdam, mostly NIMBYs of the about the Hohenhout. There's no Hohenhout here. Just put it out, great, you assholes. Um, this is, I don't know, 6. Yeah, probably about 6 billion. I mean, maybe 6 billion, like to the euros of 2 years ago. So maybe today's euros like 6.5 or something. But yeah, I mean, this is less the cost of a base tunnel. It's just that, again, it's even though it's you can think of it as one big line, it's really a combination of a few small things. Um, because yeah, it's the connection to Düsseldorf, and then the connection to another connection to Köln, and then like part of it is also for domestic usage in the Netherlands. It requires a lot of coordination between Deutsche Bahn and NS. Um, I don't know how good NS is internally. Deutsche Bahn, even internally, is not very good. Um, there's a big problem with the politicization here. I mean, again, nobody runs against the civil service, but says who ran the Ministry of Transport for 12 years, and it shows. It kind of wrecked long-term rail planning in Germany. Um, and yeah, so like this, yeah, that's and again, this is with an onward connection transfer. That's like 6.5. This I don't know because this requires tunneling. I don't know how much, but like to pass like from Aachen to the border, you need like this is it's 80, but again, it's more expensive 80. So I don't know, 4, maybe 3, 4. But even that's not a lot of money. It's like all this stuff is done for less money than is being spent on a base tunnel. Again, it requires a lot of planning coordination, and that is the part that the EU governance is not very good at. Yeah, this is another 6, I guess. Um, this, yeah, I mean, all of this is clearly affordable to all of the countries involved. It just requires much better coordination, and they're not doing it. And that's why when people talk about cross-border rail, unfortunately, a lot of these initiatives are things like a network of night trains, which is very nice if you have a lot of spare time and you think that the journey is as important as how you're going to get there. Um, and then it's kind of the intercity equivalent of what in complaining is the new left approach of to the car, the world, to the pedestrian city center. So here's to the car and the plane, the world, to the train, a handful of people who imagine themselves as backpackers. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a good point. No, no, actually, it's not. You're making an order of magnitude error now. This is 100 million a kilometer, a little less than 100 million, not a little less than 10. And this actually makes sense in light of how expensive the base tunnel in the middle is. Plus, Italian high-speed rail costs are high, not 100 kilometer high, but like 40, 50, and then French rail costs are rising. So it's a high cost, but it's not an absurd cost. 25 billion for 270. DP is not. I mean, I think my understanding is that the rail service here is a lot better than in Britain 30 something years ago. But yeah, a lot of it is shaking up management. But one of the reasons I'm supporting EU federalization of a lot of things is you keep things in the public sector where you belong, but you shake up management. Ask me sometime about the EU army and its replacement of the borderline fascist French military or borderline fascist in a different way German military. Um, yeah. The Corot. Bear in mind that I made the same error once in a blog comment, and I got the cost of the Chuo Shinkansen off by an order of magnitude and thought, ooh, Japanese maglev is really cheap. Let's imitate that and crayon maglev all over the United States because it's only like 10 million a kilometer there or something. That is truly horrific. Yeah, yeah, no, just again, it's little things like, and I don't even mean little things like speeding up the Hohenzollern the Hohenzollern blocker. I mean things like um getting communication at that level, getting that kind of rolling stock integration. Um, I mean, eventually Europe's going to also need to have a long conversation with itself about how it's assuming that that the intercity trains will remain inaccessible with these 550 centimeter, not 550 centimeter, 550 millimeter platforms that will never have level boarding to a single level intercity. Um, to a bi-level, it might actually. I mean, the TGV duplex is actually a step down from 550, and so you need to raise the roof a little bit to have it level. But I don't know if the French loading gauge can take it. I think the German one can. The Nordic ones obviously can. But for single levels and bi-level high-speed rolling stock is kind of a technological dead end. And by kind of, I mean actually is a technological dead end. Um, 760 is about the absolute minimum that you can get something accessible out of. The industry still has floors about 1.2 meters. Yeah, they weren't thinking. I mean, so the thing is, you can run regional rail this way, and this is far more important. And the reason is that regional rail has way more installed base of legacy platforms. Um, this is also why high-speed trains are longer than slow trains. High-speed trains serve a smaller, more controllable number of stations where you can actually lengthen the platforms to 400 meters. Forget about it with regional trains. Um, that's um, I mean, Zajiva has Jacobs. Like, I mean, Stadler has Jacobs. Like, it's not. It's annoying. It's not the. It's not the absolute end of the world. Um, but or you, I mean, honestly, I mean, it's not going to. I mean, American rules on this are stupid and weird, but you can. I mean, honestly, if you can do a thing where we have 760, and then you have like a little bit of a ramp at every vestibule, it's going to be annoying, but actually accessible. Um, but yeah, and I mean, bi-levels have the same issue too. I mean, you can't move between cars with bi-levels, with level boarding to the lower level because you move between cars on either a middle level or the upper level. Um, yeah, exactly. A lot of regional stations do have these problems, especially when there are thousands of them with decent servers. Like here again, it's not the American amateur hour where, yeah, most of their platforms don't exist, but also don't have meaningful amounts of ridership, and so you can just in America say it's 1250 or 4 feet or whatever or nothing, and here it's harder. But yeah, because essentially there was nothing at that level. Um, there were there was the Berlin S-Bahn, but it was completely separate. There were the RATP portions, the RATP portions of the RR, which are I think 920. Um, uh, I don't even think you need double deckers with disability access with American gauges. I mean, you need. Remember, the TGV duplex is a step down from 550, a step up from a TGV duplex. The TGV duplex is small. The TGV duplex, I think, might actually fit in every restricted northeast corridor tunnel, with the maybe the exception of east side access. I mean, we can check this, right? The TGV duplex is height 4303. Um, so 4303. I'm pretty sure the standard. This is so. Bear in mind, this is lower than a lot of standard American single levels, which I believe are 14.6. Um, and second, so in Germany we don't have as many duplex trains. We have some, but not as many. Um, in the Nordic case, it's like going to be like the Nordic loading gauge is huge. But it's not something that requires a very wide gauge. Yeah. Yeah. High platforms are better. If you're running, so what do you mean the UK experience? I mean, the UK experience is so maybe because the only time I've ridden trains in the UK, they were within Greater London, unless you count getting between Gatwick and London. My experience with UK platforms is I just walk on. It's like an S-Bahn. I don't have any, um, like, I think it's about a meter, right? I think that's what they said is going to be done for high speed too, and that's actually not bad. Um, the issue is, again, what kind of trains are you planning to run? Okay, this is kind of ridiculous. This is kind of ridiculous. You absolutely can do level boarding to 920. The ROR does that. There's kind of an annoying issue where the ROR sometimes is trying to do compromise between 920 and I think 550 or something, because the SNCF side of it is not 920, but the RATP is. I believe the Berlin S-Bahn is 960. The Munich S-Bahn, I think it's 960. And maybe there are parts of it that are lower, farther out, and then you have steps, but the urban parts of the Munich S-Bahn are 960. Um, yeah, yeah, exactly. And so you can do 550. Yeah, five. So right, and that's the issue. It's always so in Switzerland they left their double deckers because in Switzerland they figured that they're integrating rolling stock decisions into infrastructure and planning. Um, the government wants everything to be built in the UK. Has someone reminded them that, like, they keep saying that the UK is a country of free trade, and they supposedly left the EU in part because the EU was too protectionist, and they want Britain to be a free trade country, or is it all right? It's the Tories, never mind. The issue is, I mean, there's essentially one standard height, and it's 12, and it's about 1200, but small variations within that standard are normal. But anyway, the issue is that in Switzerland, because they were planning on a fully integrated system where you don't have strong distinctions even between an S-Bahn and an intercity train, they could not have a fully segregated system, or even a partially segregated system like much of the TGV. So they had to be able to serve every platform, and this imposed restrictions on their ability to run very long trains. And this is why, in lieu of lengthening the trains as much, they run double deckers. And so if you're planning on double deckers, which again are fine for medium speed stuff, 550 is fine. Actually, probably better than 760. But there's always a high speed intercity rail does not work with 550. I mean, it does if you want steps. If you don't want steps, maybe 760 minimum, like 920 or even more than a meter. If it's if it's an urban S-Bahn, you can do either high or low. You probably would not want double deckers in an especially crowded environment. Paris loves its double deckers and is then surprised why the dwell times are climbing, and it is no longer capable of cramming as many trains through the tunnel. We used to be able to cram in a train every 2 minutes. At rush hour in the peak direction, it is no longer capable of doing so. I think it went down to to a train every 215 and then a train every 230. And yeah, these are bilevels with bespoke three-door pairs and like extremely wide doors. Even that is not as good as what you can get out of a single level. Yeah, exactly. And exactly. Floor height is relatively easy. So I will say that low floor trains do cost more and do way more, but that is not because they're bespoke. It's just because they're low floor. It's kind of like yeah, exactly. So it's always also it's always easier to widen than to narrow. Essentially every standard gauge, and this is one of the things that annoys me about India's hate for its own broad gauge. Every narrow gauge train can be very easily made standard gauge. Every standard gauge train can be very easily made broad gauge. It's going down a gauge that's harder because there's going to be less space for the systems. And so, but if you're India, buy broad gauge. The Spaniards buy broad gauge. Like it's fine. And yeah, exactly. It's the same with floor height. I think the only piece of rolling stock that I think is inherently low floor is the Talga. But yeah, I mean the EU. I don't think the EU should like force everyone to go 25 kilovolts. But I do think the EU needs to coordinate it better because it's one of the things that it's literally like intercity rail in the 20th century is inherently a public undertaking to the point that the only good private success story that of the JRs in Japan. These are these are privatized, but first of all, big infrastructure construction was made by the state. Second, there's still a little bit of a there's still I don't know if a little bit, but there's still a belief that the Japanese state will not let the JRs go bankrupt. There is at least some kind of implied government guarantee, and also a lot of coordination between the JRs. So this requires the state, this requires the government, this does require the EU to actually govern and not just nudge. This is not something EPP will do. if this is also not something that RE will do because RE is incoherent. It's something that, in theory, it's something that in theory a social democratic party could do, but not S&D, which is essentially junior partner to EPP. Um, GEFA, it's like new left stuff again. To so what is so their urban policy is again to the pedestrian city center, to the car, to the world. So here it's to the train, people who are okay sleeping with strangers overnight, to for like actual mass travel, the car and the plane, which sucks. But yeah, the UK does have issues about the gauge, and again, it's specifically a problem with electrification because the arch bridge, because it's not just a low gauge, it's also a less than square gauge. So it's like this, and then you can sometimes fit in the wire, but you can't fit in the pantograph. Um, and this has it's kind of annoying because it's a thing where Britain can actually build relatively cost effectively, but the headline costs are very high. Um, yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say that. I mean, I know women who do that. I mean, it's not like an exclusively male thing, but yeah, it's. I mean, and I mean, I'm not comfortable with it. Like, I mean, it's. But again, it's the sort of people who like staying in hostels. Um, again, people who often like it's usually very bohemian people who think that humanities versus science degree is like a category of oppression, um, and who kind of look back, who like who like think about like a more civilized and slower world. It's wait, what? What? This is what? This is like fucking Egypt or some shit. And I'm not saying Egypt is like randomly chosen country. Like Egypt, specific, like Cairo has a severely underbuilt metro system. They have a combo of high construction costs and a government that has absolutely no concern for the welfare of its population. Um, and like a lot of conservative countries with very crowded metros and a lot of sexual harassment and assault, they have women only cars. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But all I'm gonna say is I'm sorry, and like in a queer future, they're just gonna be like swimming pools for queers or something. And for any cis viewers, in case it's somehow unclear what I mean by swimming pool for queers, um, trans and genderqueer people tend to be incredibly uncomfortable going swimming in public because like you show your body when you're in a swimming suit, and this is often not like something you'd like to do if you have dysphoria. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's, um, and so the issue is that I mean, last time I went swimming was 2016. I my partner and I were the only people in the pool. Previous time was 2013. There was public, and all my discomfort about that was one of the things that made me realize I'm NB. Um, yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, I mean, they're like, yeah, this is, yeah, it's one of the, I mean, the other, I mean, my guess is that like I mean, you could do some kind of open coach, maybe, where I mean, you're sleeping with strangers, but it's not three strangers, it's 40, so there's more of a safety number. It's like on an airplane. It's like on a night flight. But yeah, like a lot of this is just, yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And so, but anyway, yeah, that's like cities for queer. Like, I honestly need to vlog about cities for like queers sometime, which is not going to be now, and it's not going to be in a week, as I mentioned. Um, but yeah, um, Anyway, do people have more questions about this? Like, I don't mean about the swimming pool. I mean, also, if you want to know more about swimming pool. Oh God! Oh God! Yeah, I'm sorry. I am sorry. Yeah, this is a reminder why I don't. Yeah, earplugs don't actually help that much. What's the thing we can be most optimistic about? Let me think. Question. So again, big things are being done. This is actually going to happen. This is going to happen. Some of these are going to be happening. I mean, Switzerland is very conservative about some of these things, but this is going to happen. So physical construction in a lot of places is going to happen. There are attempts to make the system more legible. Again, SNCF is being, or they're being blockheads, but they're also losing money, and so their ability, like their ability to extract at SNCF is at some point limited by the fact that they're falling behind and they know it and everyone else knows this. Um, like they get to bully other people now. I don't think they get to bully other people in 15 years. What else? I don't know if Belgium is ever going to get attacked further. I don't know if there are a lot of people who are more interested in this in Germany. Um, it's kind of like within the Green Party, I would say it's kind of a generational difference. So I will say that the younger Greens that I meet are not in any way YIMBY. Like they're the kinds who tell me that I can't possibly believe that building more housing in Tempelhof will actually make housing more affordable. How can I possibly believe such a ridiculous thing? But um, but first of all, the younger Greens are either pro-nuclear or don't give a shit either way. Robert Habeck was very much playing to the old card. Uh, and the younger Greens also care much more about good transport policy. And yeah, they're all cyclists who think about how they can cycle within city center, but they also care about more than that. Um, this is actually a tension within the party, which is on the one hand kind of against big infrastructure, and on the other hand, its voter base lives in city centers, um, especially at intercity level. These people like taking trains between city centers. Um, so stuff like making Berlin to Munich actually fast, or Berlin to Köln, or things like is actually useful. And it's also a bunch that's very pan-European. So, like, I think the new left will eventually evolve past, 1960s, 70s matched state, neither Washington nor Brussels. Which, I mean, like in foreign policy, it's already evolving past neither Washington nor Brussels. Remember, the Green Party in Germany is the only one that's actually been consistently good on Ukraine. It's fast enough, but I mean, it's not like they're like good enough is always a problem. Like, I mean, it's a continuous ridership on speed is a continuous ridership on trip time is a continuous variable. Um, so even stuff like Berlin, like even stuff like making Berlin faster to München and then on the way also to Frankfurt and then to Leipzig is pretty good. Yeah, everyone. Yeah, yeah. There is a split on on this, but at intercity level, I mean, at intercity level, the sort of people who believe in like electric cars vote for the Swedish moderates and think that the Sweden Democrats are not actually that bad, all things considered. Um, and but like certainly with the new left, there is a thing, and you talked about nuclear power before, as I said. I mean, at the big 20, they're calling themselves moderates. I mean, their name is the Moderate Party. I mean, in the same way that the Sweden Democrats are not actually a pro-democratic party in any way, shape, or form. I mean, they maybe believe in democratically murdering journalists, but that's the name of the party. Not my fault that they call themselves something other than the Conservative Party. But anyway, yeah, um, but again, at intercity level, I think the younger Greens, again, they're not YIMBY, but they're less animated by NIMBYism. Um, Note that the German Green Party keeps sidelining their only their only minister president, um, Winfried Kretschmann, just because he's that much of a NIMBY and kind of racist. And at the big climate protest on the 20th of September 2019, I saw one anti-nuclear sign. There were 100,000 people there. I saw thousands of signs, either generic or anti-coal, sometimes anti-car, lots of anti-oil, one anti-nuclear, held by two people, but one was somewhat older than me, one was retirement age. The median age at the protest looked like early 20s. So there is a transition in which younger, more environmentally conscious people do want this, and over time, Europe is Europeanizing, in the sense of like having a stronger European as opposed to national identities, and um, consider the fact that basically every German under the age of 30 speaks English. Not necessarily very well, but they speak English. Like poor English skills are very much an older generation thing. Um, so there is going to be more pressure. I mean, stuff that's actually happening again, it's mostly very big things. The small things are, if anything, being neglected. There are certain regional lines across the border that John Worth is talking about, um, and that are being shuttered. But the actual, like, the I shouldn't say big things like personals, but things that are useful. Again, like stuff like Pilsen to Bavaria is unfortunately remote, but um, like little things that can accrete might actually happen. Um, like I don't know if they're actually going to get off the rest and build something like Berlin to Warsaw, but I can see a universe in which it actually happens. Ordering dinner outside, even within Meta, but yes, that's because the person you're. Bear in mind that if you order dinner outside Meta, then you're talking to a person who is probably B1 in German. Because and like they don't speak very good English. They also don't speak very good German. They do speak very good Turkish, Albanian, Arabic, um, maybe Serbo-Croat. Yeah, exactly. But the point is that like I mean, actual like Aryan Germans, like native Aryan white Germans who um are monolingual in German, it exists, but not very much in the cities, not very much among younger people. Um, and yeah, I mean, there is again, it's kind of Europeanization. I mean, it's a slow process, but I mean, it took a while for people in like anywhere in Germany to start thinking of themselves as German as opposed to like Catholic Rhinelanders or whatever. Like it's happening a lot faster than between when like Germany decided to auto genocide in the 17th century and when like Germany became a country. Um, so this again, it's happening, but it's happening like EU institutions are very much following and not leading is a big problem. But at like identity level, it is happening. There is more of a push. So far, again, it's starting from people who are okay with night trains. People are like maybe motivated by flight shame, but by I guess it's like this. It doesn't exist really in English like flight shame, but like in Swedish like flugskam or something like that. Let me actually check with the correct Swedish word. Flugskam, flight shame, not SF shame, flight shame. And they're actually saying it in flugskam. Flugskam. Um, yeah. This is so. If you, the thing is that motivation by flugskam mostly got to very close in travel. But even like people are recognizing, for example, German domestic air travel took a nosedive in the last few months of 2019 because of flugskam. and the same is true in Sweden, and then international didn't because how the hell are you going to get from Berlin to Paris? I mean, I know that it's possible. I've done this, but there's like most people are not environmental martyrs. Like I also lived in Providence, well over the poverty line without a car, which is not typical there. But anyway, are there other questions? I mean, I actually really like this. Oh, because of the queer detector. Yes. Yeah, that is always very fun. And by fun, I mean, really, they're calling Luxembourg Let's a book. No, it's shame. It's not fear. It's not fear of flying. It's people who think that flying is immoral because of. Oh, you mean Steph Acuity? Anyway, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, also the UK is, I think, harder, like more hardline than most places about like liquids. But I just learned to drink before I go on the plane. And unfortunately, I couldn't. Like I tried to learn not to fly, but unfortunately, I do need to visit New York. Like it is, I will say that it is possible to get from London to Berlin with only one, like overnight in the middle. Yeah. Anyway, are there more questions about this? And by the way, Steffi, are you in my Discord? Because I know everyone else is in chat. Oh, on a train? Okay, I've never done that. Mostly because I'm too paranoid about train delays. I did do London to Bonn in one day, connecting Brussels, and then Bonn to Berlin. Like that's very easy. But like connecting in Köln, I guess I can do it in one day if it's like early morning to late evening. It's just it requires me to trust Deutsche Bahn connections and uh, Eurostar connections, and I am somewhat paranoid. Yeah, it's doable. It's just yeah, yeah. Oh, is there any benefit? Is there any benefit? Yes. It is useful to connect them so that people can get between Brussels or Paris and points north of London. These trips do exist. The problem is that it's really difficult because even if they co-located, the kind of the same reason why they are not co-located, that is to say, um, a lot of extra space is required. Um, Pretty sure this is wrong. Or is this like a high-speed dual tunnel under construction? Anyway, but also for some reason this is in kilometers and this is in miles and this drives me nuts. But the main reason they're hewing to, not the only one, but like one of the main reasons it's Houston rather than build this connection and then go to St. Pancras is St. Pancras no longer has space. St. Pancras was the only station with space when they built the when they built High Speed One. Um, this was not intended. It was very tunnel heavy and it's not the best connection, but that's what they built. And so there's no longer space based on how they're using the tracks. And there's also, remember, there's full track segregation because of the security theater and the passport checks. If they essentially the same thing that would make Eurostar much better to use would be getting rid of that. This would also make the connections, therefore, between Eurostar and trains going north of London, or for that matter, trains going domestically within Belgium, and France much more pleasant to use. And this simultaneously would also create more space at St. Pancras because they wouldn't need full track segregation. They're just not doing it. It's kind of like one thing that's breaking everything, but I mean, go tell Britain that they need to join Schengen. Like, I don't even think Dark Keith is going to do that. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can always do things like Farringdon is London Hauptbahnhof for I actually don't even know if Farringdon is the best location for this. In Paris, the Crayon, and to be very clear, it is Crayon, is so the retro Crayon is to have done this when Châtelet les Halles was being built in the 70s, but that's no longer viable. The only way you're doing it Paris Hauptbahnhof, which might still be useful apparently, um, is to essentially build uh, Gare du Nord Thief and Gare de l'Est Thief, like essentially one station that has like two tracks to here, two tracks to here, I guess 8 platform tracks underneath the space for Gare du Nord, Gare de l'Est. I think I've mentioned this in a previous video. Like the issue is that there's a lot of demand for urban renewal here because the suburbs that are served here, like out of Galdino, are very working class and very racially diverse, and the sort of people demanding urban renewal don't like seeing black people and Arab people loiter right outside their station as they get off Eurostar. Um, Anne Hidalgo, I don't think Anne Hidalgo is especially anti-racist or anything like that, but she has higher priorities, she has more important priorities than like making sure that white people don't see black people. Um, but also I'm pretty sure the main reason she survived politically is that the people running against her were like dumb and split the vote. But anyway, if this ever happens, honestly, you couldn't even without doing this. Just with I mean, Mind Cavern and say it's €1 billion or something, but is you do this and essentially the Paris Airport for not being the center, but it's Gare du Nord / Gare de l'Est connection probably to both. Um, and then you tunnel to Gare de Lyon and to Gare Montparnasse. Um, like you do need space at an intercity terminal. Like I mean, you can use space very efficiently, like in Japan, but Japan does not do everything on 2 tracks. Farringdon is where Thameslink and Cross-Australia. What about rerouting high-speed run tracks to Hart? I think the tunnel only gets you to St. Pancras. Like the tunnel, like it's a specific tunnel that goes here and then it only gets to St. Pancras. So it's another tunnel to get this to Euston, and Euston has less space. In contrast, this is something that already has tracks or can be done with very little tunneling if somehow these tracks are not available. Um, it's a kind of weird thing where you can do one direction more than the other. I'm pretty sure this is just under construction stuff that they're including out of Houston, which again could be into St. Pancras. It's just for reasons of historic preservation and the fact that they're using way too many tracks at St. Pancras because they're inefficient. Specifically because of their belief that Schengen is morally equivalent to communism and Nazism at the same time. Uh, and this is why it's not happening. Yeah, all of I mean, sure, but it's also, yeah, in France too. I mean, in Paris, I should say Paris. Like, not all of France is Paris, not all of Britain is London. I do need to remind myself. And yes, these are not people with a lot of foresight. These are extremely reactive people. EU planning, I mean, it's not EU, it's Britain, but EU planning is also incredibly reactive. Um, oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, are there more questions? Because it's going to be, I guess, it says rec 222, it's actually rec 224. Um, like, it's a very European crowd here. I mean, like, I know Prague isn't, but the rest of you guys are, and so it's. Yeah, it was always planned, and there's also Eurostar to the south, by which I mean there are actually direct trains from London to certain points south. It's just that they're not frequent because they can't. First, I mean, generally, French high-speed rail planning isn't based on seat turnover, but even if it were, they would need they would need what separate facilities at each station, so they can't just do okay. This is Eurostars to gets you to Paris, and either on the same train or on a train at the same station, for which you don't need to cross anything. For which the connection is 10 minutes at most. You get to anywhere else in France, and that is a big problem. Um, And again, Paris should have had a Paris Hauptbahnhof in the 70s when they were building Le Halles, but it was not done. Doing it in the future here again, not viable. If you want a crayon, you can do it here. Yeah, it's a security theater bullshit, and also passport checks, um, which are not just security. I mean, flights have security theater. Um, Spanish trains have a little bit of security theater, but no passport checks. Um, Hell, to get on, like, I think they check your bag. I don't remember what they check, but I mean, a rando off the street can't walk onto the platform at Centrale in Milano. I think you need to show a ticket, but the ticket gets you into the station, and then you can wander around. It's not. It's so kind of like the entire concourse is kind of like a connection area at an airport. And again, it's not security there. I don't remember if they even check bags. Like in Israel, they just maybe require you to show a ticket to make sure that you're not like a Roma loiterer or something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. Yeah, I mean, so there were. I mean, yeah. Part of the issue, or also remember, north of London would need to be smaller loading gauge because British loading gauge is smaller than the continental one. So yeah, for a bunch of reasons, it dropped it like that, or the fact that at Eurostar pricing, you can fill trains from London to Paris and London to Brussels. You can't fill trains between Birmingham and Paris. Uh, like they take longer. Birmingham is not a large city. And you have the malus from Eurostar pricing and from Security Theater. Oh, where's this Discord? Yeah, I have a Discord. Trying to think if I have a way of messaging you. I'm constantly paranoid about inviting people to the about having open links to the Discord because I'm worried about spammers. But if I find like if I have a way of messaging you, let me check this like on Twitch. Um, okay, I'm going to message, not mod, not ban, not timeout. Oh, we're on Fetty, yeah. Yeah, I can message you when I get off recording. That's fine. Like, I'm okay with like you guys viewing, like seeing the Discord. I just don't want just to be broadcast on YouTube. And again, I'm very happy with people inviting other people. I'm just paranoid about open links because again, I'm worried about spam. I have not had to ban anyone from Discord. I've managed to have zero. I won't say zero bots. I have two bots. Okay. Um, but they're bots that I specifically installed. Um, so zero random bots, zero spam, zero Nazis. Um, the way the internet should be. Um, but anyway, um, okay. People are bombarding me on. People are bombarding me on Slack. I do need to get off. Um, ooh, yeah, this is very unusual. Usually, we do twin high-speed railways with motorways here, but they're side by side. They're not one over the other. Um, Might be some urban motorway bullshit, but honestly, all urban motorways are, like mostly all urban motorways are kind of bullshit. Let's face it. Um, but as I said, I'm gonna. take Saturday off. Wait, Saturday off. I mean, solve puzzles and not sleep very much. In a week, we're gonna talk about something that is closer to what I do for a living. Yeah, it's not just Germany. France too. Um, and I mean, it's twin on the side, and they do deviate when they need to. Like, it's not that terrible. It's not like the U.S. and its love affair with freeway medians. But again, it's a European issue. It's very different from like American problems. Thankfully, like, we have problems. Thankfully, we don't have American scale problems. But I will see you again in a week. And thanks for watching and ciao ciao. Yeah, exactly.